Hey folks, good morning. I think it's me and Chris and Dominica between you and lunch, so I'll try to keep this as light as possible. My name is Stephen Tier. It's definitely, yeah, it's his fault. I'm a product and technology development professional, not quite an engineer, not quite a product manager, often a reluctant project and program manager, sometime coach, internal consultant, the list goes on. I've spent most of my 20-year professional career at a large enterprise. So like I think probably most of you, I experienced the industrialization and misinterpretation of Agile and DevOps at the coalface, or at the enterprise coalface. And also, like many of you, I kind of emerged from that experience looking for a better answer and a better experience. Over my career, I'd of course discovered kind of flow principles and practices many years ago. Tried my hardest to kind of read and understand Reinertsen the best I could. But finding VSM and through the work of VSMC, those principles and practices feel much more approachable and contextualized now than they did maybe a decade ago. A decade ago, we were kind of arguing about the best certification body or what a story point was. And it feels as though we're in a little bit of a better spot in 2023 than we were in 2013. And in fact, Chris said yesterday when we were in our member session about VSM and its emergence, he said something along the lines of, we should have been looking here all along, which really resonated with me, and I totally agree with that, and thanks, Chris, for the inspiration. So I currently work at Shutterstock. I'm the VP of Technology, Operations, and Strategy, although quite often I kind of describe myself as the Chief of Staff to our CTO. Our CTO is Sejal Amin, who is on the board of VSMC, and some of you might have met her here last year. At Shutterstock, our mission is to be the end-to-end partner of the creative and professional, empowering customers to tell the best versions of their stories. To do that, we own the world's largest digital media library that consists of, or comprises 600 million images, 45 million videos, 2 million music tracks, amongst a bunch of other stuff. Our editorial brand provides entertainment, sports, fashion, news and archival content for media, theatre and brand development, and we supply premium and celebrity content partnership to brands like Reuters, Life, Condé Nast, and many others. The most exciting thing about working at Shutterstock is that we bought Giphy earlier this year, which means that we have a ton of fun on Slack and building slide decks and so on. So yeah, watch out for the Giphy story. It's going to be fun next year. So I'm here to talk about the organization part of the VSM roadmap. One of the things that came through the member session yesterday was kind of the variety and the differences in which people use this map in practice. I'm sure you all kind of recognize this map and the steps involved here, but it seems pretty common that everyone has a slightly different context, which affects the order in which they do these things. In our context, we were assessing, visioning, identifying, organizing, and mapping pretty fluidly, which kind of worked okay for us because of our scale. There's probably less than 500 people in our whole value stream network. And so even though that might feel messy to some of the more structured amongst you, it kind of worked for us. Our story is actually quite unique in the sense that this was an internally led implementation. We weren't working with an implementation partner, and we're only now formally instrumenting at the far end of the VSM roadmap there. We had, for better or worse, kind of used some proxy measurements to understand generally whether we were delivering value quicker or slower than we had previously. So things like release frequency or experimentation velocity in the early stage of our VSM journey was good enough for us to understand that we were moving in the right direction. So even though we don't yet have a VSM partner. We are in the process of beginning a pilot with PlanView. I've actually worked with Chris before on a previous implementation, and my experience of working with them on our implementation was also that during a pilot process, you're probably doing all of those things in some capacity in a short period of time. So we don't feel particularly unique at Shutterstock. That's the way that we approached it in this last year. So I wanted to start really briefly with the kind of circumstances that led us to where we are today. I had joined the company almost a year ago now with Sejal at the same time. So both of us were new to the environment. Both of us were new to the e-commerce industry, which was kind of interesting. And we kind of showed up, and there was kind of a mild engineering as a cost center kind of vibe. Not as bad as I've experienced it in some large enterprises, but it was kind of there lurking in the background, which unfortunately I think it probably lurks in the background of a lot of the organizations that we all work in. There was a lot of unhealthy tension between our product and engineering organizations. And then outside of that group, there was a lot of very unhealthy tension between product and engineering and the rest of the organization. We were heavy into kind of project planning, so we would do quarterly planning events, commitment ceremonies, followed by inevitable end of quarter delivery disappointments, carryover activities, etc. Our measure of success predominantly was, did you deliver what you said you'd deliver, rather than did you achieve the outcome that you set out to achieve. The most startling thing to me coming into Shutterstock was that we were kind of dynamically reteaming every quarter, which in some circumstances can be a very healthy thing to do, but for us it was very, very disruptive. It gave us kind of no technical continuity because the person who built the thing was quite often running after a new project no sooner had it been released. It didn't allow us to focus on ongoing technical health. It didn't allow us to focus on ongoing team health. So one of our main objectives through a variety of tools that we used, including VSM, was to try and correct that. Like many companies, we'd been pretty resilient through COVID. But as we emerged out of COVID and kind of the financial landscape was changing and recalibrating, we were starting to see that the dysfunctions and the tensions in our business were actually preventing us from being more successful. And obviously, while we moved into a non-growth period, it became more and more important for us to address that. And it became more important to our senior stakeholders to kind of be part of it. So there was definitely an impetus for change. It was accelerated by new leadership, and there was general recognition that there was a better way. The other interesting thing about our case study, which really came into focus for me yesterday, is that we are a predominantly e-commerce based company. So our revenue is over 800 million, and over 50% of that is from e-commerce customers. So people just logging in with credit cards to make individual transactions or small membership, or participate in membership. So while the company had kind of grown into an enterprise over a period of 5 to 10 years after its IPO, it had developed some of the tensions and dysfunctions of a larger enterprise. Our technical foundations were pretty strong still, because you can't survive in e-commerce if you're slow. So the DNA was there. We knew we could move faster, but we were just not organized and optimized for that speed outcome. And so VSM, along with a couple of other things that I'll share with you in a second, was kind of the way that we reignited our flow of value. So how did it go and how did we do it? So as I mentioned before, organization as a step in the roadmap was happening throughout the process. It originated in product and engineering, but obviously as we explored our stakeholder network, it broadened out to other parts of Shutterstock. So more distant parts of our technology infrastructure, for example, marketing, business intelligence, customer care, a little bit less on sales because the enterprise side of the business runs a little bit independently. With each stakeholder group addition that we made, we were kind of dynamically changing our vision. and our value stream definitions as every new member kind of joined the network. And our understanding of our own organization even changed as we went through that process. It took us about 2 months to get through that, at least to a point where we felt as though we had sufficient enough definition that we could kind of roll this out at scale. From the groups that had previously been excluded from activities like this, so like chartering or project initiation activities, so this would be like people like business intelligence or customer success. The engagement that we had from those groups was absolutely incredible because they were really pleased and happy that we were giving them an opportunity to participate in strategy development and operational strategy development. That kind of muscle probably existed when the company was much smaller, but again, as we became an enterprise and we grew, we just kind of lost that cadence. Through that process, it became pretty evident that we needed a very clear kind of business benefits realization framework or methodology. And it was really helpful to have people like BI, customer care, marketing help us hone that idea. We knew that North Star was the kind of tool that we wanted to use, but we probably went through 100 iterations of what our North Star metric was and what our key input metrics were through their involvement in the process. And it would not have been anywhere near as good had we tried to dictate or determine that just from within engineering or just from within product. One of the other kind of hallmarks of why or how we made this successful was by establishing value stream ownership at senior levels. That was super important to us, that it was something that was cross-functional and not owned solely by product or solely by tech. Although those kind of VPs who kind of took ownership of those core product value streams were typically from product and engineering. But for example, we have a customer acquisition value stream, so marketing was a very, very important stakeholder and leader and co-creator of that value stream vision and process. It probably won't surprise you to learn that we employed a number of kind of enabling frameworks around our value stream network to aid our progress. So that included team topologies, DORA, the flow framework from the Plan View folks, the North Star framework. The surprising thing here is, I'm sure you're all familiar with all of these concepts or combinations or configurations of these concepts. It constantly astounds me that the industry at large is still kind of emerging and evolving into these concepts. We talked a little bit in the member event yesterday about how close we were to the chasm and how close we are to being mainstream, and it still feels to me that value stream included, as well as some of these other frameworks, we still have a little way to go, maybe 5 years, maybe, well, hopefully not, but maybe longer. Team topologies in particular was a really important tool to us as we transitioned away from project-based teaming. And really that formed the backbone of our technology organizational strategy. The concept of stream alignment and stream enablement is pretty much second nature to us now, and that's probably the proudest part of our success story as we thought about organizing our technology group, that we were able eventually to kind of introduce those concepts, and they still are fully functional and standing and growing today as we stand here a year later. The other tool that we employed was Business Canvas, which really underpinned our organizational discovery, as well as some of those other early parts of the value stream implementation roadmap. For those of you that haven't used Canvases before, they're kind of really useful tools, and they help you answer questions like, do we understand the problems we're trying to solve? Do we have solutions or hypotheses, and do we know how we're going to measure those things? How does our value stream complement our business strategy? And do we have the right people, tools, and practices to scale our success? Very, very practically, if you've not used the Canvas before, in-person world, this looks like a huge kind of whiteboard with co-created content across a bunch of domains. This is an actual illustration of the actual domains that we used in our canvas. If you're doing it virtually, we had many Miro versions of the same thing. The domains, I think, on your left-hand side, I think, I can't see them very well.
Partners, activities, resources, and cost structure.
These really formed the basis of some of the organizational conversations that we were trying to tease out in the conversations. Chris and Dominica are going to walk you through a very specific Canvas version that focuses a little bit more specifically on those things, which is optimized a little bit more for that outcome, whereas we were using Canvas as a general collaboration and enablement technique. So before I hand over to them, I just want to kind of summarize a couple of things that we've learned or that we're currently reflecting on. The first thing that I mentioned, which really kind of formed fully in my head yesterday, was about the use of value streams in e-commerce. Of course, there is application there, but I wonder whether there's anything unique about our situation that is different to a lot of the enterprise deployments that many of the partners that we've heard about in the last couple of days have experienced, where they might be working more on B2B software, more with organizations who are used to deploying maybe quarterly or biannually or whatever. And so actually, I'm hoping that through our engagement with PlanView in the next couple of months that we might kind of explore that, and we might have a good case study to share with you about the uniqueness, Helen's nodding her head, the uniqueness of value streams in our context. More specific to kind of the organizational topic, there was 3 of the learnings. First of all, with education comes evolution. So here we are, we're a year in now, and as much as it terrifies me, we're starting to think about alternative interpretations of our value streams, and the consequences that come with potentially us making that decision could be quite big. Of course, we're better prepared for that outcome with a year's worth of experience, but it still will be a bit of a lift to make that shift if we need to make that shift. The second thing is the emotional burden of change really surprised me. It's very easy, as I say, to assume that tech companies understand all of these concepts, and we introduced a lot. So value stream, North Star, DORA, Canvas, input metric, flow framework, like the list of concepts goes on. And not only did we create some confusion and anxiety within our technology team, which was, as I say, slightly disappointing because I really believe that technology is at the forefront of all of this change. But more so, it kind of created a lot of anxiety in our non-technology stakeholders because some of these concepts aren't approachable, or at least they're not approachable very easily. Our teams are a lot more conversant in them now, but trying to explain the North Star framework or the DORA metrics to somebody in customer care is kind of quite a difficult endeavor. And we did talk about that a lot yesterday in our member session, about finding more useful ways of talking about value stream outcomes rather than focusing on the enabling techniques that we use as technologists to achieve those outcomes. And then the last thing we learned was with big change comes big conflict. In retrospect, our stakeholder identification techniques were probably a little bit basic, certainly not as structured as you're going to learn from Chris and Dominica here. And in some cases, we probably projected some level of exclusivity in the value stream tent, which is absolutely not what we intended, but I think common with any change program, it's easy to kind of fall into that trap. So it took us a lot of time to kind of make sure that we were not being exclusive. And as I said, Chris and Dominica are going to give you some tips on how you might approach that using a Canvas exercise. So I think we're going to leave some time for some questions at the end, so I'd love to answer any questions if you have any for me, but I'll hand it over to my partners first, and we'll connect in a couple of minutes.
Thank you, Stephen.